Hey everybody! Hey everybody! Welcome to Office Hours. We're still working out some of the kinks there. Yeah, there's no no direct. So no. So anyway, hold on. Let me turn. No. So, hey, everybody. I'm going to explain something to Nate real quickly. We're on the top of the hour. Nate, I asked for talent PL. Talent PL is what I was trying to get to. So, no direct. Anyway, welcome to Office Hours. We're still working out some of the kinks of switching over to the Office Hours 2.0, where we have a little bit high res, and we're able to do a couple new things, but we're still working out the kinks. That's why we're doing it. That's what we do here, is we work out the kinks in front of everybody. If you're watching, and you'll see a link down below, you can click on that link and you'll end up in Zoom to be part of this conversation. In there, you'll see another link to that'll take you to Makana. And that's actually where you become a producer for the show. And you can ask questions. You can vote on those questions. It's really important to do both. To ask those questions and then really spend time voting on the questions, because we spend more time at the beginning of the hour than the second half of the hour on the questions, on each question. It's also important that you tag those questions so that we know what those are. So we have a first hour general conversation about anything you want to talk about around media and virtual production. And the second hour is today is remotely possible. We're going to talk about how we have been doing all this remote switching and so on and so forth, and remote mixing with our QLs, and we're going to talk about how that works. So if you have questions about that, we're going to have a little bit of a demo for you at the top of next hour, hopefully, if everything works well. So it should be really a cool second hour. If you think you can answer some of these questions, or you're frustrated with the answers that we're giving you, and you feel like you need to correct the whole thing, then what you should do is join the panel. We open the mic checks at 6:40 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. You have to be here by then to be part of that panel. If you're not sure, you think that you want to test your system, make sure that you're ready to go, ask some questions. We open the doors at 6 o'clock in the morning, so you can actually come in early and see if it's working. Now, we'll be talking about all kinds of stuff. We're making small talk while we wait for you to come in and test your system. So always raise your hand and just say, hey, I got to check something. And we'd love to make sure that you're ready to go. So first hour, again, is general. Second hour is something that we think is interesting specifically. And so we're going to do that now. Today, there's going to be like another thing that we're still figuring out as we go through this. Bill's going to be doing Q&A for the first hour. Guy will be doing Q&A for the second hour, because a bunch of us will drop out to go to the second hour at about 15 minutes before the top of the hour. And there's a kind of a transition there. So we'll figure that out. Anyway, so Bill, let's jump into the questions.
Great. Let's see how everything works. And good morning, everybody. First question comes from Leo Mendel, who's in Pinner, UK. And he says, a new version of StreamDeck 5.0 with the StreamDeck store has appeared. What does the new update bring to the party?
What's new? Nothing. It's all pretty much the same. No one knows. Go ahead, Leo.
They've got a new stores of things, but I know that Jeffrey has got his hand up for a technical reason.
Oh, go ahead, Jeffrey.
Throw me host, I'll cut.
Okay. Yeah.
For first hour.
Yep. Anyway, go ahead. Beju.
Yeah, the biggest thing seems to be that they're adding a library of audio tracks, license-free audio tracks, and royalty-free samples, basically, which you can trigger off the StreamDeck either using the app or the hardware. And they're specifically mentioning the royalty-free aspect of it, so you can use them in your productions. So I think it's more also to do with the Twitch issue with live streaming. A lot of people using effects and stuff getting hit by copyright strikes. So it could be an issue with that, for something for that as well.
There we go. Let's go to the next question.
Comes to us from Rupert McRae in Dallas, Texas. And Rupert says, other than having a great keyer and having dedicated hardware, is there anything an ATEM Mini or Extreme can do that cannot inherently be done on a software switcher, like, for example, vMix, with the right hardware?
Well, I think that one of the big things is that you have externalized all your switching and that processing to an external computer, which means that you can keep on hooking it to any computer that you want. It just works. So it just shows up as a camera, and you don't have to have it, there. So I think you absolutely can do more with vMix than you can with an ATEM. But it works consistently. It's relatively easy to write to, and it is not contained to a computer. I think that's the part of the problem too. We think about it as like, oh, well, it's cheaper to get a piece of software. Yeah, if you have the computer that's powerful enough to run it. So go ahead, Todd, and then Stuart.
in my case at least, it generates a whole lot less heat from your computer. So my computer shut down less when I use an ATEM than when I try to go software only.
Yeah, absolutely. Go ahead, Stuart.
Same point, but I was just going to describe it as a heater for the computer. So in a cold room where you're running vMix, it warms up.
Yeah, absolutely. And it means you have to have a computer that's fast enough to handle vMix, to do all the things that will do more than the ATEM. You're going to spend money on a PC to make that work. Go ahead, John.
I would use both. I like the flexibility of having a software switcher, then fed that back into the ATEM.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Go ahead, Richard.
Yeah, I mean, we last year at the beginning of the whole pandemic, we were using Wirecast and a couple of NDI cameras for our theater, and it worked great. But one of the big things that I think Alex said at the beginning was the software switchers are a great Swiss Army knife, whereas the hardware encoders and switchers are just much more reliable. And we've now moved over to hardware completely, and it's night and day. It's really reliable, it's rock solid, and it's much, much better quality all around.
Yeah, the biggest challenge you get into with software is that you can ask your computer to do more than it can do. and that can happen really fast. Something that seems like it would be a simple problem that, just adding this extra layer, just adding this extra filter isn't going to be that big of a deal. The hardware switcher is limited, but it does what it says it can do. And that's the distinction in that process. Go ahead, Jesse.
Yeah, if you want to get multiple sources in, you would need multiple capture cards. So you buy one ATEM and you can very easily switch to different sources.
Right. Yeah, go ahead, Leo.
The reverse of that is, though, that the ATEM can only bring in sources which are hardware. So things like NDI don't come in, or it's very difficult to bring NDI in, which is where some of us are moving towards.
Yeah. For those of you using NDI. Next question.
John Pruitt from here in the panel in Huntersville, North Carolina. Thoughts on the new FaceTime meeting capabilities that Apple announced yesterday?
So I think that there's a variety of things. Yeah, go ahead, Carl.
So I'll speak to one aspect. So it looks like Apple wants to Sherlock Zoom, and they're going to probably do it slowly. They're not going to do it all at once. So they've got the grid view. They've got blurred backgrounds. I think this is kind of good for us in a way, because it may cause Zoom to go, okay, let's add more features that Apple's not willing to give, like ISO audio. We're getting ISO video already. So maybe there's an arms race here, which could be good for office hours.
And I think it'd be a long time before Apple Sherlocked Zoom. But I think that it is I think Apple has to continue to make that product. I think we talked about it a little last night in the show, is that Apple needs to keep on making something that's reasonably good for the users as part of the larger ecosystem. It's kind of like when Cisco bought Slido, I was like, well, it'll just get kind of absorbed. It doesn't have to be great. It just has to fit into the overall, like it just gets sucked in and it becomes part of an overall solution that's being provided. And it doesn't have to continue to innovate quite at the same speed, because it's part of something that everybody else, you need all the pieces. So an Apple user needs everything to work together. And so Apple needs to make sure that they stay somewhat in the game, but I don't think they have to compete directly with Zoom to make that work. So I think we saw cross-platform, which is going to be interesting. As a person who has worked on things that are only Apple, and then it becomes cross-platform from Apple's perspective, things like TVs, and AirPlay, and so on and so forth. The bummer for me is that it usually means that things get worse. From a development perspective, you're basically constantly going into underpowered hardware, a fragmented market, lots of things that make our life as developers harder. Is usually cross-platform is not something that I'm excited about, because it means that you're not writing straight to the hardware. You're writing to many pieces of hardware, and that usually lowers you to a lowest common denominator. Go ahead, Beju.
Yeah, I'm just wondering whether we are making the wrong comparison, comparing it to Zoom. I think the better comparison might be comparing it to WhatsApp and Telegram, because that's the market that's really directly competing with FaceTime. At that end, because a few years ago, like a lot of people I know would get an iPhone specifically for FaceTime. Then WhatsApp really took over, and WhatsApp's added multi-video chat. Telegram's adding that as well, multi-audio chat as well. So I think that's more of a market that get people specifically staying in the Apple ecosystem for that communication and have something to draw people into it, rather than a cross-platform app.
I also think that we're going to see something when AR starts to pull up. There's going to be a lot of AR stuff that I bet will be in FaceTime. And as that happens, the people who are being given links to their Android device or their PC will be, oh, you can't see that? It's because it's in Messages or it's in FaceTime, but it's not cross-platform. You can't see that. So there'll be a little bit of FOMO that goes out, and I don't think that the other platforms will be able to keep up in that area. No, next question.
Comes from Leo Mindell in Pinner, UK, and surprisingly enough, he's asking about Zoom. A new Zoom update has dropped today, 5.6.7. What are the group's thoughts on it?
Do we have a list of what was added? Go ahead, Jeff.
Some minor bug fixes, but it seems to be for future software. It's got an active apps notifier that won't go live until another software update in another week, but basically tells you if someone else in your meeting or webinar has an app that has access to personal information or real-time content, and it gives you a notification. So more of these security kind of warnings when you come into a meeting.
Next question.
Moving on to luck, Miguel Lopez Waterman, our friend in New York, says, is last night's WWDC show available asynchronously to people who don't have the direct link? And
it's now on the site. Yeah. So it's anybody can watch it on the site now. It was just unlisted, so you really could have gotten to it directly last night. It wasn't like it was private, but I wanted to experiment with the idea of having it just go through the website and have people go through that. So that's what we did there. It's interesting. I don't think that the viewers, I don't think any of the viewers that came through the embed view were counted by YouTube, which I think is an interesting, because the number of people in the panel, the number of people in Mukana was 2.5 times higher than the number of people, than the number of viewers. So I was kind of like, well, that doesn't quite add up. So I think that we're getting into, this is a YouTube embed thing. So, or how it counts viewers. So it was, but yeah, so it was only available on the website for that. Yep. Next question.
Moving on, this comes from Richard Louie in Belfast, and Richard says, why are downstream keys Luma keys? That doesn't make sense, I don't think.
It does. Oh. I think that the question is that why are you only doing a Luma key instead of a chroma key or other things that you may have there? And that has to do with the interrelationship between the layers. So it's easy to have it down, you have to carry that entire bus. The downstream key, the two downstream keys have to be their own bus that they're sitting in, and they're not really interacting with the content below it, and they're not embedded. And so what you want to do is adding that extra processing. And there are some downstream keys that do have chroma key. Like it's not that it's impossible to do. It's just that it's a cost perspective, of what that is. So what you want to do is, from a processing perspective, having that chroma key inside of the upstream key allows it to do its processing and then share the bus with the video, because it just gets embedded into the video as it gets pushed out, and then it goes through the system. So you use that as the downstream key is a Luma key, and it also means, because it's also very dependent, it's expecting you to give it an alpha channel or making it easy for it to generate an alpha channel. So it's not in the same realm where it doesn't have it doesn't process the pixels, in the same way that a chroma key does. So, or the upstream keyers do. So that's simplified version of what that is, but that's why it's limited to the Luma key. So if you want to do a chroma key and you want a chroma key in graphics, then you end up in the upstream key or area. Whereas if you want to do the Luma key, if you want to do a downstream key, you're in Luma key. And as I've proven a couple times here, is that it works pretty well to do. You can do a Luma key for a lot of things. Other than that, you can do outboard processing. So like an Ultimat, for instance, will give you you can send in a green screen, and it will send you the fill and it'll send you the key, locked together into the switcher, so that you can actually do a downstream key, but it's an outboard processor to make that work. So there are ways to do it, but that's that's how that works. Does that make sense to you, Richard?
Yeah, I mean, just because I've started to dig down into keying a little bit more, and I'm starting to try and understand why some are used in some way and some are used in a different way. And it just occurred to me, why are they all, well, in the ATEM so far, they're always Luma keys?
In the downstream. Yeah, absolutely. Just a simpler process, for that extra bus. Go ahead, Courtney.
And you can think of it as layers. You normally wouldn't want, and the downstream key is the very top layer, and so it's dealing with all the layers that are composited together before it gets to that. And if you had it being a chroma key, then you could have somebody keyed in an upstream key over a green screen that has, a blue shirt or something on it, or a green shirt, and then you would have a problem with, keying out the composite, whereas in a background keyer and a lower upstream keyer, you don't have to deal with something coming in on top of it that's going to affect your key, other than luminosity.
Next question.
Moving on to Rupert McCrae, Dallas, Texas, and he's interested in today's big kerfluffle on the internet. Many major websites were down this morning when CDN provider Fastly had a wide outage. Was anybody here impacted? And remember, folks, things can go bump in the cloud, as many people found out, I think.
Go ahead, Leon.
So it depends what you regard as affected. Effectively, a lot of what happened was things like runtime libraries that you use on websites disappeared. So you were seeing things like CSS broken on pages, you were seeing JavaScript broken on pages, because they're all coming from similar resources. So it has a massive, massive knock-on effect around that. Literally everything from eBay lost its pictures to newspapers were down, or they were quoting down. They weren't down. What was happening was you weren't getting the rendering. It's life. It's life. These things, we want these things to work. We don't want to pay an absolute fortune, and we have to sit there and say, well, eventually these things occasionally are going to pop out, and it was down for about an hour.
I mean, Google's been down for 4 hours, and there was we had one where we were about to go live, and Facebook, someone cut a fiber line somewhere, and suddenly we couldn't go, nobody could go live. So one line somewhere, and so this kind of stuff happens. You're anytime you externalize your infrastructure, you're going to be at risk of something going on. Go ahead, Ken.
Yeah, I was just going to say that the use of external CSS files or JavaScript libraries is just down to lazy coding, as far as I'm concerned. You can easily host it and serve it yourself, but
the main thing you have to weigh is what is the chances of your own server and your own process failing before a cloud process failing. And so, for instance, I used to have my own web client, like our web server or whatever that we had on a server. And, at some point we just moved to Google because it was just, it was a lot easier to, Google managed the security for us and managed the process, and we could log in anywhere. And the chances of something going wrong with Google was lower because we had problems with our mail server like once a year, and so it was one of those things. Go ahead, Leo.
So I run websites for Olympic federations, massive, massive websites. I will get in the Six Nations 50,000 unique visitors a minute. That isn't 50,000 in a day. That's 50,000 in every minute. And the next minute, there'll be another 50,000 unique visitors. It's massive. And you have to sit there and go, I have to weigh up what I can afford to deliver and what the customer can afford. And so we use, everything's on AWS, everything is on shared libraries. These libraries are enormous. They're serving a huge percentage of the world. And sometimes you just have to say, I can't build my own infrastructure for everything. I have to sit there and say, these central infrastructures are there and I have to use them.
Go ahead, Ken.
I would agree. I built websites for Disney. We have got into being lazy. And I'll say it again. It really is that. It isn't that difficult. A lot of the libraries that are used, you're only using a fraction of the code that actually need to serve on your website, and you're slowing your website down because of it. It's I won't go into this because I can go on for this forever. I love this subject, but yeah, it is a.
I think there's a second hour here with Ken about building websites that or infrastructure or Ken and Leo and a few other folks. Oh, it'll be all the UK. It'll be the UK the web developer second hour. Okay, we'll put it down right now, but we'll pick that back up again. I promise. All right, next question.
I'll watch that.
Yeah.
I'll listen.
Popcorn.
Scott Mueller of Clifton Corners, New York, is up next with looking for a Thunderbolt 3 hard disk drive, looking at the OWC Mercury Elite Pro Dual RAID with 4 terabytes or 8 terabytes. But reviews say the fan is louder than all the other options in that class combined. Not ideal for an audio guy. Any other suggestions?
The one that we've gotten that we were really happy with is the OWC NVMe the RAID is really good, and you can get that up to 16 terabytes of incredibly fast speeds. So without much noise. Go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, I use an old WC Thunderbolt. It's not it's a Mercury, but it's not the Elite. I can't remember the actual branding on it, and it's out right now because I had it with me. But it was not terribly noisy at all. So it may be a matter of the individual one you got. People, if they do run into a noisy hard drive, fans are replaceable, and you can always put in a silent fan.
You go ahead, George.
This is what Alex is talking about, and this is the NVMe, and it's super fast and it's extremely quiet. Is this the one you're talking about, Alex?
Yeah, I believe
Thunderbolt
it, yes.
This is the Thunderbolt pass through, so
this is I believe, and that's 4. You can put up to 4 NVMe's in there.
Yes, so it goes up pretty.
And it's screaming fast. I mean, I think we tested like 2200 or something like that. It's fast. No, next question.
Moving on, we're going to Brian Anderson here on the panel from Silver Springs, Maryland. Our TV died yesterday, so I'm shopping. What features would be on your checklist? OLED versus LED, Dolby Vision or Dolby Vision IQ? What else? Looking for a 55 to 65 inch diagonal model. This will all connect to a Denon AVR that will eventually do Dolby Atmos. Also, any brands to run to run away from would be appreciated.
Go to Leo and then George.
Whatever Costco have got on discount special offer at this week.
Go ahead, George.
Costco in the US, LG, OLED. I would go in that direction.
You go ahead, Carl.
I'd always spook Sony. So they've got all the formats in there. So the J series is the 2021 series. If you want a bargain, go for the H series. If you want the highest quality, like the backlight on the new iPads, the 995 series has the backlight. The 8 series has the Edge LED.
Go, Jesse.
Yeah, the TV behind me, I was trying to turn it on, but couldn't get it on in time. That's a LG OLED 65-inch. I've been super happy with it.
Yeah, it depends on the price range that you want to go into. In my office, we have the CX series of the LG, which is really nice. You know, it's great. It's about 55 inches. It's not a huge one because they're expensive. At home, I admit that I have a Vizio. I have a Vizio that's like 70 inches or something in my office, just because it was less expensive, and I do a lot of testing on it. And I didn't want to be sad if I broke it. But I think that the LGs have been the ones we're happiest with for color. The CX series is really, really good for the price. But you definitely want, vision is important. Paul.
Yeah, I noticed Costco had an 82-inch. For $1,100. I don't remember the brand, but that's pretty extraordinary. 4K, 82-inch.
Yeah. You know what I did? I actually bought the previous year's model because I read it had the same, pretty much the same screen in it, and it was probably $1,000 less than if I bought the current year model. So I bought this for about $2,000.
Just remember that they're dumping all the 4Ks because they're going to 8K in the fall. So just know that this is why suddenly all these 4Ks are really cheap. Is the fabs are going? They're trying to move to 8K because of the Olympics, and so the Olympics is pushing a lot of stuff to 8K. There will be 8K footage that you can only see on the TV, the 8K TVs, because that's the only way to deliver it. So there's going to be just know that if you're buying it right now, the reason that all these 4Ks are so cheap. I wouldn't, to be honest, I probably wouldn't dump a bunch of money into a TV right now. I'd probably find something that was less expensive that got me by, and I could use it for something else. Because I think the 8K will be all you're buying, in 6 months or 9 months. And so, or the 4Ks will be nothing, like 1080p is now. But the whole industry is moving to 8K. And so we're kind of on our way there. Go ahead, Leo, and then Ken.
So yeah, all the 4Ks are all branded saying for the Olympics 2020. And I'm picking up I've got a 55 that I picked up yesterday, 4K for £300. So that's under $400.
They're just trying to get rid of them because they're going to push to 8K in the fall for the Christmas season and after the Olympics. And there'll be some stuff that you can get on there, but they're dump. We're in that dump phase, which is a great deal. If you're happy with 4K, it's a great deal. Just know that the 8K is right behind it. They're just moving them out. Like we saw with 4K, at some point it just reached this point where they were trying to sell off all the 1080p so that they could, move 4K into the system. Go ahead, Ken.
Yeah, before buying any TV, I look at, there's a channel on YouTube called HD TV Test. He's a tester that goes through all of this. Really good. He's really. I would recommend going to his channel and having a look and see some of his reviews first before jumping down and putting down any big money for a TV.
I'm just waiting. I'm waiting for 80-inch 8K to get to a point where I can afford it. Like I just keep on. I check it about once a week. Like, and for me, my upper level is I can spend. I'm $2,500 on an 8K 80-inch. So as soon as it hits that number, I'll let you guys know that I have it. It's in the wall. It's on the wall. Go ahead, Jeffrey.
I will say stay away from Insignia. That's they usually have a scaled type, even though they say that they're doing whatever resolution you get on there. They're not. And then if you don't care about the 8, then Prime Day is coming in 2 weeks, so you'll be able to save some cash on that.
Yeah. Next question.
Yash Mori in Washington, D.C. For the panel, what has been your experience with ZoomISO or ISO? Any major bugs to be aware of?
I'm not sure how many people on the current panel are using ZoomISO. I know that we're getting ready to use it a lot here. So I don't know if we have opinions yet. Go ahead, George.
Just real quick. I'm getting signals all around, but obviously it's in beta, so you can't. I don't think you could really judge right now on what it's doing.
Next question.
Leah Mendel, in Pinner, the UK. How do you play Apple's spatial audio on a receiver? Do you need to plug in a Mac?
Yeah, go ahead, Carl.
So the Apple TV plugged in via HDMI to a receiver. The Apple TV supports Atmos.
Right. And have you listened to? What I haven't had time to do yet is to push the spatial audio to my home system.
Yeah. So I listened to some of the songs in the playlist into my Dolby. I've got a basic Dolby Atmos system, so the speakers are basic anyway. But yeah, it does work. It does put the point sources in. It is good. It is good. You can tell it's remixed because I own some surround sound Beatles, some surround sound Queen that they did themselves back in the day, back in 5.1, and it is a little bit different to those. So it is a reversion of it. It's not just 5.1 ported over. It is a remix. I'm
excited. I paid a lot of money for Tidal and I never got it working anywhere past my phone. I just couldn't get my Apple TV to log into it. So I have the 7.1 system that I've been waiting to listen to that music on, and so I'm excited to jump on. I don't know how many. I think there's a lot of Tidal users that we all just went, yeah, we're gonna drop. I dropped my subscription as soon as Apple said we're live, and we're like, okay, we're done. Go ahead, George, and then Ken.
I'm going to pull my question that I asked about Spatial, but I spent some time last night after we got done listening to some Spatial, and it's the real deal on the Macs.
I'll keep on saying it. I just think that the difference between stereo and spatial is 10 times the difference between mono and stereo. Like, it just is an entirely different experience. Go ahead, Ken.
Yeah, I just listened to the spatial demo on these, and I've listened to some of the spatial stuff before, but for me it transformed a song that I love and I've listened to on lots of things before. Now being able to just listen on these anywhere, it was really amazing.
I will say that for me, and it's something I used to do when I was a kid. When I was in a dorm room in high school, I would take my 2 speakers and just set them on either side of my head. Not loud, but just 2 speakers from my little boombox. And I'd listen to Joshua Tree at lunch, just kind of just go off. And it felt like it was all around me. And I feel like that's now I feel like with the Macs, you get the spatial list that you start listening to, and you just lay down on a couch and just listen to it, and you just close your eyes. And I feel like the Macs should have come with eye things. Just close off the rest of the world. You almost want a helmet that you put on that just is kind of drops the rest of the world out, and it's a really great experience. So anyway, it's going to be fun, and the thing to know is that not only are we going to talk about spatial, but as we go through the summer, we're going to talk more and more about it. And as we get into the fall, we're going to get really serious. I'm very committed that this group becomes the world leaders in spatial and high dynamic range. That we as a group know more about it than anyone else in the world. And so we're going to keep on, just chugging that direction. So as we keep on talking about it, part of why I'm talking about it is I want us to get interested in it, and we're going to do more labs. We're going to do more things. We're going to, produce things that we can do there. Go ahead, John.
Do you think that the spatial audio, sorry, my tweeter, Mike Bird is happy to be here. Do you think spatial audio has a value proposition for FaceTime?
It does. If you use it does in the sense that when you first see it, Blue Jeans does it right now. So if you jump on with Blue Jeans and you have something that can handle spatial, and that can be an iPad or a laptop that does it. It's a little disconcerting at first, but Blue Jeans will just put it's got Dolby audio, and it'll just put your people in different places. It doesn't do it really intelligently. It just kind of like spreads them out. So it's not like visually is in the same one, but it spreads it out. And at first it's weird, but then after a while, you start to, it makes it actually easier to identify who's talking. You know, when your brain will slowly map that I'm hearing something from over here, and that means that. And so I think that, I actually think that spatial will make a big difference for comms eventually. Like we'll put it into spatial so that, you know, it'll just sound like different people talking to you all around with those headsets. You know, and I think it'll be interesting. Go ahead, Courtney.
You just mentioned spatial on an iPad or a laptop. Are you talking about listening through headphones or?
No. Really? It is crazy what the laptop does. So the laptop calculates, is using the mic and the speakers, and it calculates it and it bounces stuff off of the things around you. It doesn't make any sense. Like I'm just like but the last 2 years of laptops and Apple's laptops and iPads, when you watch it, you're like, I don't understand how this is working, but it totally feels like it's around you. And it almost sometimes feels like it's behind you, and you can't figure out like how it's doing that, but it's very magical. It actually, I'd argue that in some cases my laptop has better spatial than my AirPod Pros. You know, when I'm sitting there in my office, I feel more of the audio around me than I do sometimes with the AirPod Pros. It's a very, they've done a lot of really interesting work in acoustic calculations. Yeah. Next question.
Leah Mendel. Oh, no, sorry, that was Leah Mendel. We're at JHB of New York. Is there any way that we can see what Nate is seeing and his setup? Eventually.
Yeah, we're still trying to get this thing to work, as you saw at the beginning of the show. so we're still we'll get it all worked out, and then we're going to build it out. The goal for us in general is to figure out how to build this bigger show together. You know, the second hour being this kind of experiment with this larger global production. You know, like that we're pulling it all in, and then we are going to definitely give you seats to it so that you can watch it. And then we want to give you opportunities to do it. And so there'll be kind of this process where you watch the show, you then watch the behind the scenes of the show, then you work on the show. And so the goal is to have a lot of people know how to do this. So this is just the one step. So definitely it's coming. It's just that we're barely surviving the turning on right now as we go. We're trying to do something really complicated. By the end of the summer, we'll be doing a show that's probably more complicated. It'll be more complicated than any daily show in the world. When you look at the integration, there might be more shows that are more complicated than ours, but not one that we do every day. Next question.
Stuart Fairweather is here from the panel in Melbourne, Australia, and he says, how does the news about the FBI and AFP's access in Anom, in the Anom server, impact encryption used in cloud-based services of all kinds? And so he has a link there from ABC about this.
Yeah, go ahead, Stuart.
Just for people outside of Australia, AFP is Australian Federal Police. So they're kind of our equivalent to the FBI with different laws that approach. And the server is ANOM. It's basically they've had access to everybody's encrypted messages for something like 3 years now. And they ran a major sting in Australia. So you can tell that Carl and I are quite innocent because we're here.
Scooped up. Go ahead, Leo.
Yeah.
They ran this sting around the world, actually, and picked up lots and lots of people. So we're all still here. So that's good to know.
Yeah, I think that Apple, I don't think has ever really said that your cloud server is going to be as secure as your phone. Apple, the line that Apple draws is the phone. You know, they're not drawing in, and they hand over to subpoenas, cloud information all the time. So it's not, so when you put it in, Apple's big focus is, and that's why they're going to your search stuff, everything else is going deeper into the phone as far as your security goes, but not into the cloud. So I think that they'll do the best they can, but anytime you go into the cloud, I used to be a real paranoid lot. That I mean, literally, there was one time where I burned my thumbs so that when I had to give my thumbprint for my driver's license, it wouldn't go in. I was that level of I won't play, all cash, like everything else. Then I did some work for some folks and realized how deep the water was. And just decided that it was futile. There was no reason to do that. The key to do this is just not be interesting. Don't do anything interesting. And I found that I can live a pretty good life without doing anything that's interesting. In those areas. And so, if state sponsors are interested in you, it's pretty hard to avoid. And I know that people think they can, but they're pretty good. Anyway, they have a lot of more information than we know. Next question.
A. Mitchell's a familiar name in Washington says, with all of the audio processing for Zoom generally being designed around a group of $75 USB boundary mics sitting on a table, is it worth just buying one of these mics as Zoom is made to sound perfect with these? What are the benefits and downsides to choosing one of these, quote, perfect mics?
Yeah, go ahead, Jeff.
No. Definitely don't go to the lowest common denominator. Work to have good sound without requiring processing. So get a quiet room, get a mic close to you that is a high-quality mic.
Yeah, go ahead, Carl.
Yeah, unfortunately, boundary mics have found their way into conference rooms because they have big, heavy tables. And that's kind of where a boundary mic does kind of work. It will pick up the entire room, though. So pick up air conditioners, everything. So it actually picks up every sound wave hitting the table. So they're really good inside bass drums. So you actually fix them inside of a bass drum to the wood. Amazing. Conference table, not amazing.
The thing that I found the best for conference rooms is in the Microflex line, there's these little clip-ons that you can just kind of clip onto your that people can just kind of clip onto themselves, and they act as lavaliers, and they're relatively small, and they just kind of pop in and then just become part of that conference network. And they actually do a pretty good job of, auto mixing and doing all the things. And that's been the best solution that I've seen in conference rooms. But I will admit that where I go, obviously, is that I don't want anybody in a conference room anymore. I mean, I lived for a decade of listening to speakerphones. And if I could, it's been much better in the last year when people were at home than it was listening to that echo. And part of the problem is the conference rooms aren't built for audio. They're shiny and they're pretty, and they have lots of glass and shiny boards and everything else, and all of that reflects the audio back in. If they built the conference rooms for audio, it would probably actually work pretty well. And that's the problem, that they don't do that because they don't think about audio, even though that's what a lot of us have to use. Next question.
Rupert McCrae of Dallas, Texas is up next, and he says, any knowledge on integrating a Meraki or Ubiquiti VPN environment to an AWS VPN or AWS Direct Connect, thus avoiding open port forwarding on public IPs for traffic that would otherwise be in the clear?
I don't know. Go ahead, Jim.
I haven't actually done the Cisco Meraki. I'd have to quickly look, but AWS's site-to-site VPN has the ability to download profiles for the supported devices that essentially kind of pre-configures your setup. So take a look on the AWS site-to-site VPN documentation. If I find the link, I'll place it in Makana for that particular item.
It's perfect. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael's up next, no place given. I've heard of Ableton Live being used in many non-musical audio situations like crowd audio augmentation for sports. Despite it being built and marketed as an electronic music production or performance product, what features make it a product of choice for those who use it in those kind of use cases?
Go Todd and then Carl.
I can't actually profess to those kind of use cases because I don't use it in that way. But literally anything, a scene which triggers every clip straight across, or any clip can be assigned to any computer keyboard letter, or to any MIDI controller. So the idea of being able to cue things as well as QLab or any of the other solutions out there, it's kind of awesome. And then to make music inside it as well.
Yeah, Carl.
Yeah, so Ableton Live has kind of a split personality. So it is you can record into it like a normal DAW, but the playback is where the clip based. So it is, as you say, like you have a scene which is like essentially, if you can imagine it, like you've got segments A, B, C, and D. A, B, C, and D can have as many clips as they want. So for crowd augmentation, you may want sound coming out of the actual stadium for the players, and it can do multi-channel out to different zones. and each zone can have different sounding crowds, so it's not going to phase. But yeah, so essentially it's a quite a large play out system that can do multiple channels with multiple clips, and it's scene based with a push of a button.
And one of the things that was done during COVID is to, when you're watching a live stream when there's nobody in the stands, what the Ableton Live operator was doing, they had kind of a pad that they had lots of just buttons on, and basically what they were doing is programming, because it was doing all that random access. They could sit there, and when there should be a cheer because they just scored or they just did whatever, they just pushed the button, and then what they had was actually game sounds. So sounds that were delivered that Sky had partnered with, I think, Electronic Arts, and recorded all these crowds for Electronic Arts games, and then went back to them and said, "Hey, those all those cymbals, could we have those back?" So all that stuff that they had recorded so carefully, they were able to bring back and use in different ways and be able to fire them off during a live game, so you had a feel of what was going on there. It wasn't just quiet. No. Next question.
Leo Mendel's back, and he says on AV Tech Talks last night, Sam, is it Kokajko of Zoom event specialist team, said NDI out will be coming to Zoom rooms. How could this change the production for shows like Mad in the Kitchen?
I think that would be a big thing of getting it into the cloud, right? Go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, I think that it's cool. I mean, it depends on how many feeds that you can get out of it. Because like right now, I can take the Zoom room and I can pull 2 really clean feeds and one that has some debris, as somebody else on the show on AV Tech Talk called it yesterday. It was actually Greg Gibson. He calls it screen debris. So that's a new one to me. But yeah, it just depends on if you're going to get 4, you're going to get 8. And so how many rooms do you need? Because those rooms are expensive. They're $49 a month. So if you're going to have to get 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 rooms, I mean, it can get pricey fast. So it depends on the need and how your setup works, because the way we do it is we're just pulling them into vMix. Once you got so you take one instance, that's a Zoom room, and that's what I would call a contribution machine, and it contributes to your cutting machine. So your cutting machine could be vMix or Wirecast or something else. So it just depends on if you want to take that knowledge and that time to hook everything up, because it's not easy. I'm going to try to make it easy, and I think there's a few of us on the panel that want to try and make this easy for others, because it is complicated. Don't think that going up there is just like plugging a cable in. There's a lot more to some of the questions, like the VPN stuff and how do you get your StreamDeck to work, and it's not just the cable locally that you plug in anymore.
Yeah, Leo, real quick, and then we're going to move on.
The one thing that Guy actually reminded me to say, Sam said that he has requested and they have agreed that NDI out will be 100% clean. Yeah, no artifacts on there at all.
Debris. I love that. I'm going to use that. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael says, how do you use a CDN like Fastly that was in the news this morning? Do you stream it to it, and then the audience connects to the CDN? How does it work?
Go ahead, George. Pretty quick. We're going to end Leo.
I'm only going to speak on Wowza. It is used for security and to really keep your backend up.
Yeah, go ahead, Leo.
So traditionally what you do is you move your furniture off your website. So that's the icons, everything that will be called over and over again, which don't update regularly. So that can be your libraries. You can have your own libraries, everything. You push it through a CDN. It makes your site faster because you can push it to a location closest. So there are, if there's 50 ISPs in the country, you can put your content or those bits that don't change regularly closer to the end user.
Next question.
Ozzy Levesque, Montreal, Canada. One of my son's friends is finishing up his 3D animation, Unreal and 3DS courses. What are some of the practical applications in the industry for Unreal developers?
Yeah, all of it. They're just this giant sucking sound right now. Looking, especially if he's coming out and he can afford not to get a huge salary, and he can, and he's coming a graduating student. There's just almost an unsatiable demand for Unreal folks right now. Jesse, and then Courtney, real quick.
Yeah, it can be used in architecture. Obviously, it's used in games. It can be used in broadcast. The Weather Channel type places use it. There are a lot of uses.
Yeah, go ahead, Courtney.
And for dramatic film production is pre-visualization, because a lot of people are using it for that.
People are already using it for actually Saturday morning cartoon style things as well. At this point, especially with 5.0, you can just basically make animated films that tell the story. that don't need to be rendered it can be rendered all in real time, and we're there at this point. It's just a matter of people doing it. Leland?
There's an actual full market available for those designing virtual 3D sets for people like us that do productions.
Next question.
Mike Beardmore of Reading UK says, did I miss the news about a new Mac Mini that I recall being rumored in the Apple thing yesterday?
I'm wondering if a whole bunch of people got smoked out at Apple, like of rumors. Like, given Apple's done that in the past, where they give some people some information, and if it gets out, then heads roll. But nothing happened. So there's a bunch of rumors, nothing happened. Next question.
Michael Carmichael, how would independent artists mix their tracks in a spatial audio format? The Apple press release mentions doubling the number of Dolby-enabled studios in major markets, and that market makes me think that'd mean expensive facilities with 3 to 4 digit day rates. And it has a note, would there be plugins like Waves NX to mix spatial music content on headphones? Also many DAWs?
Yeah, go ahead, Carl.
Yeah, so this is just something mastering studios have. This is just one of their line items. So they're already doing it. So they're just now going to be expanding because it's going to be more widely available, and more labels and more artists are going to ask in their contracts if they can have spatial audio. So it's just going to be one of the line items.
Apple's made the big push. I think that within 5 years, almost every major release will have spatial. Not all the releases, but almost every major release will have spatial. And you can mix it. And we're going to make sure that we all know how to do this. You can mix it in your headphones. Like you can, it's not, and the reality is a lot of people are going to listen to it in the headphones. So mastering it in your headphones is not necessarily a bad idea, because that's how a lot of people are going to listen to it. The larger the room, the higher the resolution that you can think about it in space. So I've worked in rooms that are 50 feet long, 40 feet wide, and there's 80 speakers, and you can think about it in a different way that folds down into the headset. But you can absolutely, right now, today, in Logic, build something in spatial at very little extra cost. And we're going to do labs together working on that later this year. Next question.
Jim Schaefer in Minnesota, USA. What's happening with the iPad Pros? It's more powerful than a MacBook at this point. It uses the same hardware, no macOS, and does what a 2010 iPad can do.
Go ahead, Ken, and then Carl, real quick.
Yeah, all the M1s. It's not fast. The MacBook Pros are the iPad Pros aren't faster. Can't run faster than an M1 in a Mini or in a MacBook Pro, because it doesn't have the heat dissipation that you can get in that. But if it's the M1 chipset, then yeah, if it's in a device which has more airflow, then it's going to be able to run faster. That's why it's not actually faster than if you put it in the MacBook.
So I'm keeping an eye on the rest of the sessions for this week from WWDC about HDR target display mode for the iPad, the new current iPad Pro. So that's what I'm keeping my eye on. I hope we didn't hear anything about it in the keynote, but it may come up in one of the AV Foundation talks.
Yeah. Jeffrey, real quick.
There are a few groups out there that are trying to figure out how to sideload and jailbreak iPads so they can put macOS on. Nothing as of yet.
Yeah, it'll be hard. Real quick, Guy, do you have the information you need for the second hour? Did you get that? Are you set up? Yeah, you're going. I'm going to jump to. So we're going to hand it off to Bill to keep on answering questions. And Bill, you'll end up throwing it to me in this process. I guess then we can't talk to you. It's very complicated.
Yes.
I think I'll talk to you from the other side. We'll just let everybody know that this linkage is not going to work today. Like the second hour will be fine, but it's not going to be pretty. So I'll Bill, keep your Discord open if I have to use it to get to you and let you know that I'm coming in. I think I have an idea of how to do this, but I'm going to jump onto the other side. We'll have to move pretty quickly to get to the questions. If you're a producer, we need to focus on voting on questions because we're not going to get to all of them by the top of the hour, and we do have a guest, so we have a hard out at 8. So anyway, Bill, go ahead and take it away, and I'll see you all on the other side.
We'll make it work. Hi, everybody. All right, we're going to continue on through the questions this morning. We do have a lot of questions, so we're going to move pretty fast here. The next one comes from Richard Livey in Belfast. I'm investigating reliable remote multi-camera setup, sending signal to control room, and considering a live U800 and server. Any other options I should investigate or consider? So who here does that sort of live view, live broadcasting? Anybody own one of those? They look really, really cool. I mean, I think, was it Tucker? No, it wasn't Tucker. Who was it? Jeff Keithley that we know works with those. Beju, do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, Jeff's been pretty happy with it. He's mentioned that the LU800, he's happy with it, especially with the new update that you can get 4 channels out of it as well in sync. Alternatives could be Hivision's Makitos. Those are pretty good and pretty solid in broadcast as well. Aja has a new one as well, which I believe can do HDR, so long term, but that's not really designed as it's a remote contribution. Another option you just have to think about is, are you going to do is it always going to be to a control room in another site, or are you going to thinking of more in the cloud as well? Then you might want to look at an option which you can send to a software version of the receiver in the cloud. It doesn't require physical hardware. So it's a lot of thoughts, and it probably be better to do this when Jeff or Tucker are here as well, because they've done more of this as well.
Yeah, keep your eyes on the panel, and if Jeff Keithley or Tucker Carlson shows up here, Stuart has some thoughts on it right now. Go ahead, Stuart, and quick, we've got a lot of things to cover here.
Server-based ones always end up costing you more, and just a reminder that this is exactly what an ATEM Mini and a streaming bridge are designed to do, but they don't cost you a subscription service to a server. It's direct. You put the bridge in your own control room and feed it into your own system.
Fair enough. Okay, moving along to Chris Taylor's question from Winter Park, Florida. Chris says, Alex, I only saw one WWDC session on Thursday on USD format. It was called Create 3D Workflows with USD. Discover power of Pixar's universal scene description for your 3D workflows. Were you expecting more USDC sessions or adoptions? Alex is not here, but did anybody else? I mean, there was just, having watched it yesterday and then looked at a couple of the segments this morning, there's just a ton of information up there. And I'm kind of glad that that's all public now. You don't have to be a developer per se with a developer account to be able to get in and watch those. So some of you out there in the listening audience, if you're interested in this technology, you can learn a lot by just randomly sampling some of those sessions. Anybody else have any thoughts? No, doesn't seem so. Okay, moving on to Yash Mori, Washington, D.C. How are folks bringing in NDI feeds into their ATEM Mini? Go ahead. I'm sorry. Boy, I've got things mislabeled here. Carl, go ahead.
So the simplest way I've heard is essentially they're going to use a computer with a HDMI output. The HDMI output will have its NDI feed going out the HDMI monitor output into the ATEM Mini.
Cool. Go ahead, George Kennedy, and then Leo Mendel to finish things up. That'll take care of us to the next questions. Go ahead.
I have a couple of KiloView here that I'm using to bring into the ATM. It has HDMI out, so easy way to do it.
Easy way. Leo, let's finish up.
Bird Dog have a NDI to HDMI converter. It's a single box, but once you start looking at the pricing of it, it really starts questioning, you're almost going the wrong way.
Okay. Moving on, Jim Safer in Minnesota, USA. How did the FBI use the Bitcoin blockchain to identify the group behind the pipeline hack? And note the FBI also got the ransom back in full. Does anybody know anything about that? And is there anything we can talk about here? Go ahead. Let's do Courtney and then Jesse, and then Stuart to finish up. Courtney, go ahead.
Well, the FBI has the NSA that has all those secret tools that they generate that they don't tell anybody about that they can use for trying to track that stuff.
Yeah, it seemed like they got on that real quick. Who was before Jesse?
That's just what I was going to say, is that if anyone does know, they should be under NDA, hopefully.
Yeah, well, I remember seeing something on the news just yesterday about the fact that, yes, we did it. No, we're not going to talk about it. It's probably a good idea for law enforcement wanting to keep their methods and the rest of that secret. Let's keep moving. We're going to go to Jim Schaefer. What will future Apple keynotes become boring when we return to the stage? Virtual keynotes are like a movie at this point in time. Has anybody said they're going to come back to the stage, or will there be some hybrid thing? What is everybody's thought? I mean, they put out a boatload of information in a very short period of time. Courtney, go ahead.
Yeah, it's a shame. I think Apple will look at the fact that they built that brand new campus with the Steve Jobs Theater for the purpose of doing those live events, and they'd hate to see that money go to waste and to keep using the virtual version of it, which is just a 3D model. So I think they'll go back to live events.
They didn't know they were building a
set. To maximize their investment. Yeah, really. It's a giant 3D preview.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's not made on flats, from what I understand. It's actually brick and mortar. Leo Mendel, go ahead.
Yeah, so I think there's always this view that we're never going back to this, and we are going to go back to something. It's going to be a different thing. The two are not comparable. That's my view. You know, you do one thing one way and you do one thing another. It's like saying, well, we've produced the best ever music video. We're never going to produce an album again, or we're not going to do a film because we can't. You know, we're not going to write a book because we've written a film. I just think they're different things, and they'll have different audiences. And actually, funny enough, the buzz of X thousand people in a room again probably will be a bigger buzz than what they actually are doing on the stage at that time.
Yeah, it wouldn't surprise me. There's a thing in advertising called reach and frequency, and the reach for these things, now that they're online and go global, is unparalleled. I don't think they're ever going to get with having reporters come to a room, hear about it, go outside, touch it, and then simply send those messages out to the world. I don't think that's ever going to be as huge as the amount of audience they can attract right now. Go ahead, Jeffrey and Jesse, real quick, and then we'll zip for Alex.
All I know is last night on the Tonight Show, they had a full audience. Some were masked, some were not masked. So I think that the people within the next couple of years will kind of forget what happened, and we'll be back to some sort of pre-normalcy like we've always been. People want to go out, bottom line.
Be. Jesse, go ahead.
I feel like even though the show might not be as good having a live audience, maybe they won't have the capability as the pre-recorded stuff. I do think they'll go back to it, maybe not all the time, but there's something about the energy of being there. And I know it's just a certain amount of people, but the people that are the influencers or the industry leaders, just those people are going to want to go for the most part, I think, just to be with their colleagues and all that. So.
Yeah, I think that's a reasonable bet. There'll be a combination of things, but we don't really know. We'll see it develop as it does. Now let's move on. Alex Gollner in London, our friend, has the next question. And Alex says, I have USB to SATA cable to US with bare 2.5-inch by 8mm SSD drives. Anyone know of a Thunderbolt 3 or a Thunderbolt 4 to SATA cable that he might be able to use? Has anyone been able to source one or know where he should look? Who's the best cable vendor around, you guys think? Stuart, go ahead and pop in first.
Yeah, you're more likely to find a caddy for a drive that has got the Thunderbolt or 3 or 4 connection and a SATA connection inside, because it is a circuit board to do it, the same as a regular USB hard drive caddy would be.
Okay, Beiju?
Yeah, check OWC. They used to make a Thunderbolt 2 caddy, and I think they have a Thunderbolt 3 version as well, which gives you most of the speed for that.
Are any of those put a bare drive in the thing that looks like a toaster? Do any of those work?
Yep. Yeah. Those basically, they normally have an adapter that you can have the full 3.5, or you can have a 2.5 size into it as well. There are two slots in there.
Powers, go ahead.
Yeah, actually, I have one sitting on my desk right here from OWC, the Mercury Elite Pro. It's Thunderbolt 3, and it's also a dock, and it fits 2 drives in. You can go up to, well, depending on if you're going SSD or physical hard drive, you can go up multiple terabytes with this device. It's pretty nice.
So I guess, Alex, maybe not a cable per se, but there are solutions that'll get your drive read out of that. James Babbitt, moving on. What are the panelists' recommendations for a battery-powered adapter to connect a Sennheiser EV100 wireless receiver to a Lightning connector on an iOS device for a Zoom meeting? Anybody want to deal with that? I've done a little of that kind of thing. I have some Sennheiser AVX things, and if I wanted to get them into a Lightning, I use the... I may have it right next to me. Gosh. No, I'm sorry, I don't. There is a device made by Saramonic that takes XLRs in, and most wireless microphones can terminate either through a 3.5 to XLR or an XLR cable, and it actively with a 9-volt battery turns that into Lightning and gives you a pretty good quality signal. It's a little mixer too. You can buy them in single channel, mono, or double if you want to do that. So that's the solution I use. Jeffrey, do you have something else to think of?
You know, this is another Saramonic. It doesn't do XLR, but it does the 1/4 inch. It's very similar to what you're talking about.
Yeah, and their stuff is pretty clean. I mean, you know, I don't know if I do a Broadway musical with them, but they're certainly good enough. Let's move on. Jim Schaefer, Minneapolis, Minnesota. Why is Apple not updating calendars?
Can you hear me? We're going to switch over. Can you hear me okay?
Oh, We can. Alex, how are you?
I'm doing well. So for those watching, we're in this process of changing this process. And so I'm in a different meeting that comes back into this meeting that allows us to kind of seamlessly switch. And so we're going to jump into the second hour. So thanks, Bill, for holding the fort down while we made that switch and we figure all of this out. We're really excited about jumping into the second hour. We're here with Andrew Broughton from Remotely Possible, and this is something that we have been more and more of us have been using over the last couple of months. And so everyone says, well, we have to get Andrew on. We have to get Andrew on. So we finally have Andrew on. And so Andrew, can you tell us a little bit about Remotely Possible?
Sure, and thank you, Alex. Basically, when I was heading out on tour with my group Rain in March of last year, our 3-month tour became a 2-day tour, and I came back home and I was going, now what? What am I going to do now? So everybody was saying, well, let's look into taking courses online. Let's educate ourselves. Let's just do something until the shows start coming back and we can start doing events again. And somehow, some way, I connected up with Brian Maddox, who was having a little show called the Audio Opinion Show. And he and I got to talking about some stuff, and he asked me, you know a bit about Yamaha consoles, some programming stuff. Is there a way that we can control one console over another, control them over the internet using the Yamaha system? I said, well, it's possible. Let's see. And so I put a little test together and tried a couple of things, and surprisingly, it worked right away. And over the last year, he and I have been working pretty strongly together to figure out the sort of catches, the gotchas, the workflow, what works, what doesn't work. I also got the interest of Yamaha, who contacted me and said, hey, I hear you're doing this thing. Show it to me. Let me see what this is all about. And so I gave them a demo. I actually demonstrated it to the guys down in Japan at Yamaha head office, and they were impressed. I was thinking to myself, are they going to go, we don't want you doing this, or are they going to go, we like what you're doing? Well, it was actually
or worse, are they going to do, this is so great, we're just going to put it into the mixer? So yeah, that's always the thing that we worry about.
Well, is there any reason for me to work on this? What if they just go, oh, we've already got this?
Lukewarm is the right. You don't want them to be against it. You don't want to be too much for it. You just want them to be like, yeah, that's good.
That's right. And they said, no, they were highly supportive of it, which I thought was great. And of course, it's worked. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was going to say then, I also added a couple of other people as beta testers, Ed Willick and Andy Lipnick. And between the three of us,
Ed Willick is here with us. He's going to be part of the demo that we're going to do here in just a second. Thanks for joining us, Ed. And also Andy Lipnick, who is actually running the audio for the show while being part of the demo. So it's a little bit of a mix. So we're kind of, it's all pieced together here. Anyway, so Andrew, so you started working with Brian earlier last year. How long did it take you to get it working?
Well, it worked right away. That was the great part of it. You see, I've been working programming with Yamaha consoles for years and years and years and years. So that the communication part of it wasn't really the difficult thing. It was understanding how does this work over the internet, how to get that part of it working. That took a little bit,
right?
And but the control worked right away. That wasn't an issue. It was more about, okay, now if I want to control this console and I will have certain things come back to me, what if I need to isolate certain parameters and not have them change when I change this? It's sort of that kind of workflow stuff as you realize, there's a gotcha. We don't want that to happen. We want this other thing to happen, including the editor, for example. You want to get the editor involved so that you can when you control the far console, you can get some sort of visual feedback of what's happening on the console that's far away. You don't always have a camera on the far console, so maybe you want to see just have a confidence monitor that, yes, what I just changed really did change. So I wanted to include the editor as part of this thing. So a lot of those kind of changes, and a lot of learning about networking.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and I think that we've actually had whole shows mixed by Brian, in our offices in San Francisco while he's in Savannah, Georgia, and so the real shows, like not just us messing around or testing, we're putting together real shows. And are you starting to see an uptick?
Not yet, because I'm still I would still call it in beta. But some of these real world tests are really the things that let me know, okay, here's something we could do a little bit better. Like we did the Mad in the Kitchen. You guys did some work with Mad in the Kitchen, and I got to actually watch it happen as it was happening in real time. I was, wow, okay, there's some things there that we could make a little bit more streamlined. You know, I won't get into all the details, but as you, go ahead.
And one of the things we're planning to do is actually use it for all of what we're doing. You know, more and more. You know, you know, we're really excited about it because it's it just changes. It changes a lot of calculations for us of just availability of talent versus shows. You know, if you know, right now you're stuck with when you have someone who is. It's fine when we have someone available, but we've had many times over the audio. I will say the audio engineer is the most, or one of the most important pieces of the puzzle. The audio engineer and my technical director, you know, are the two people that I have only a handful of. You know, I have lots of other people that do a lot of other things, but like, you know, Nate, who's cutting this show, and Brian, who's I've worked with a lot for the last decade. Those two people have worked on an enormous number of shows with us because there's only like 3 or 4 TDs that I trust, and there's only 3 or 4 audio engineers, A1s that I trust. And so the issue you get into is finding those in a small town too. Like, so I'm going to go into a town that isn't New York, isn't LA, isn't, you know, some Austin, and I got to find someone who can mix a show. And these digital mixers are very complicated. You know, like they're not like, you know, they're super powerful, but they're not something. So being able to find talent and be able to link that talent into the show is pretty powerful.
Well, and one of the things that's interesting about that is that if you didn't have somebody available, but you had another person that could train that person, they don't have to be in the same room. They don't have to be in the same city. Right. If you said to me, I was going to do the show and I was going to get Brian to train me, well, we can sit offline. He can train me. He could do the show. I could follow along at home. You know, you don't, the training aspect and the ability to jump in with a junior person, let's say operating, and another person just watching over his shoulder, grabbing something if they need to, kind of like having the second steering wheel. And when you're teaching somebody how to drive, it's that kind of capability that really opens up a lot of possibilities.
And for a lot of shows, I don't expect to use it as something where the only person is remote. It's that we have someone in the office that's doing it, but there is a larger, you know, there's a support system that's out there that can jump in and help, you know, change settings and work through things. So I know that you guys have worked out a little bit of a demo, and I thought before we jump into questions, we'd have you guys show us this actually working. Can you? I know that Ed's here and you're here and Andy's here, so I'm just going to step away and let you guys show us how this magic works.
That's great. Thank you. I don't know if we can pin my console and Ed's console so you can see back and forth what's happening. And so essentially, Ed, my microphone right now is connected to my CL1 that's behind me, and Ed has control of it. So Ed, if I just keep talking and yakking, you can. So my console is a CL1, which you see straight on. And Ed's is on the one on the angle. It's a QL1. So his QL1 is controlling my CL1, which is something that's kind of interesting about the program, is that you don't have to have identical consoles on each end. So my console is the CL1. And if Ed is making a change, Ed, go and just push a fader up and down on the console, on your console, and you see it go up and down on my console. So that shows you that he has full control of that. But, you know, not just faders. He has 100% control of the console. So
this is everything. This is if he's changing the compression, if he's changing the equalization, if he's changing the routing, all those things are completely tied between the two.
Yes. Now, not just that, Alex, too. Because Alex, I'm actually noticing that if you go back to our 2 shots there for a second, Nate, I'm noticing that my screen and Andy's screens are a little bit washed out. So I can just go here real quick and I can dim both of those screens in real time from my console. And if mine was brighter or his was brighter, all I would have to do is, you can see my laptop next to my, I would just have to like disconnect, like say mine now I feel is not bright enough. I've disconnected from him, and then now I'm reconnected and I could do another change. And it happens.
So now yours is a little lighter, so you're able to make an offset if you want to.
Yeah, yep. All I have to do is just disconnect momentarily, make a change on my side. If it's, if my panel or if any of these LEDs were too bright or too dark for me, I can do that. And I mean, this is, because we're on camera, that's not something we're going to always have to do if no one's sitting in front of the remote console, but it's there. We have that level of control with this. So.
And how do you establish the sync?
Well, the synchronization, the connection is it's a TCP connection over the internet. So you can use a VPN to connect. You could use port forwarding. I have a little tunnel program that I wrote, which creates an SSH tunnel through the network. So that's a really quick, easy way. If somebody doesn't have access to the router, you can do a demo, or you can do a quick, I'm going to jump in and do something. I don't recommend it for long-term connections. Most everybody that I'm working with, it has a VPN setup of some sort. I have a customer in Australia. He's been running it since February on a TV show on a VPN. It stays on 24/7, and that's the
and
best.
How does it? How do you sync up? So you've got a QL1 on one side and a CL. Is that a CL1? Is it CL5 on the other side, or
CL1 and a QL1?
CL1. Yeah, a QL1. How do you, and I know that you can. I know that Brian has taken a QL5 and hooked it to our QL1. How do you tie those together? Like how do you get them to sync up correctly?
It's a great question. In my software, I created a function called sync. And you can either push from your console to the far console, or you can pull from the far console to your console. And you also have the ability to pull just the current state, like what the mixer is showing you right now, or you can pull all the scenes, there's 300 scenes in a console. You can pull all those scenes as well. So you can essentially sync them, and it only takes a second or so to do that.
So inside of your software, it says, okay, it knows that it's connecting a CL1 and a QL1, and it doesn't map things that don't match up between the two, or a QL5 and a QL1. It just knows not to look at those things. How does that? The beautiful thing
about the way Yamaha made these consoles is they made them compatible. Anybody that knows these boards knows that you can take a file from a QL5 and stick it in a CL1, and it doesn't care. So it's the same thing with the synchronization. It doesn't care. It takes all of the information from the far console, puts it into your local console. If there's channels that don't exist on your local console, it just ignores them. They're in the file. They're actually inside the console. You just can't access them. That's the way Yamaha's system works, and that made it super handy in that you've got now 5 different consoles you can use, and it doesn't matter which one you're working on. Same with the editor. Like the editor right now is a CL1 editor connected to my console, but Ed is using a QL1. So even though he's locally looking at a QL1, he's looking at my console through a CL1 editor. So if there's any settings that he can't access on his QL1, he can go to the editor and grab those higher channels or those higher mixes or things like that. So it does, ideally you'd want to have the same boards at each end to have 100% control of everything, but you don't have to. And that's the nice thing about it.
Oh, so you could, yeah. And then the other question there is that could you have multiple QL, could you have 5 QL1s looking at one CL1, like following along? So you're moving one slider.
Yeah, it would be one-way communication at that point. It would the receiving console would get kind of confused. It's potentially possible. I don't see any use case for something like that. Now, that being said, there's no reason you can't have multiple consoles set up. And in my software, you could have a drop-down and just choose which console you want to control at any given time. Don't forget, when you disconnect, the audio doesn't stop running. It's just control signals. So there's no reason I can't go and work on one board, disconnect, work on another board. And using the software, the way it disconnects and reconnects is instantaneous. There's no handshaking or anything that needs to go on to connect from one console to the other.
Now, the reason that I was thinking about that was that, let's say you have 5 venues in different parts of the world, and you build the whole show that one mixer, like it fit into one mixer as if it was. And so you'd have, different different pieces of that mixer that are controlling different parts of those other mixers, so that you could have a 1A1 essentially running all the mixers, but it would be seamless to them because they would just they'd just be moving the sliders around, and it'd be as if it was one show, but you'd want to be able to talk to a bunch of mixers all at the same time. I mean, you're right that they could switch between them. we've done a lot of shows that we need to control multiple mixers, and right now what we do is do it with software. Like we just do software, and Brian's done that for me. So and logged in, and typically those have been X32s on the far end, and then a Yamaha on the main end. And but we've also taken a situation where we take 8 rooms that are happening and move them all into one Yamaha mixer. And then we gave everybody little X touches to run their room. Oh. But they're all mixing all those rooms into one mixer. And what that allowed for is Brian can overlook everybody and make fine adjustments to their rooms. And then we just have people moving sliders for us as needed, all happening at the same time. But being able to theoretically, again, when you're starting to jump from room to room to room to room to room, having one person have a unified experience would be useful. I'm just saying.
I understand what you're saying. And certainly if that was something that somebody said, I need this to happen, we could definitely look at that.
Yeah.
I haven't stopped building it. There's a million ideas of things.
No. We're super excited about it as it is. In fact, I think that right now, this show that we're doing right now is being run from Andy's house. Is that right, Andy? Yeah. So Andy is at his house with a Q01. So this gets into the other two, and we have our Q01 is in our office, and Andy is moving sliders. Go ahead and move some sliders, just so we can see something. But we should see that's Andy magically moving he's magically fading up and down with nobody there from his house. So you can see that we've already started to extend that process. Is there anything else you want to show us before we jump into the questions, Andrew?
I mean, I had a little demo that shows that you can listen to.
Yeah, please do.
Particular
Absolutely.
Sounds. So Ed, I'm just going to play this multi-track, and you can go ahead and queue up particular channels, and people can hear that you have the ability to listen to whatever you want to listen to.
Great.
And yeah, just so you guys know, I'm firing the Q bus out of my CL1 into loopback into Zoom. So you should hear what Ed hears. He plays these tracks.
Okay, that's just amazing.
Yeah, so you can see that all you really need for audio coming back to you, you can certainly get away with just taking your Q bus, sending it into Zoom. Using the original sound, it's plenty good quality to hear what's going on. The latency is low enough that it's totally workable. Now, if you have Unity Connect or some other system that's more powerful, of course, use that. But you don't have to have something that expensive to get started.
That is amazing. Every time there's little things. When you change the monitor quality is one thing, and then for some reason I just didn't think about it until you showed that demo of you could just go through there and queue and listen to it as well. It's very slick.
Yeah, he's queuing it on his mixer, but he's hearing my mixer. That's the really cool thing.
Yeah.
So, and again, don't forget that even if you have the only problem we've ever had has always been a network issue of some sort of internet problem, disconnections. But don't forget, if you disconnect, as soon as your connection's back in, you hit connect, and you're back in the game again.
It's not like the other mixer just the sliders don't all go to the the ground or do anything else.
It stays where it was.
Now, now, this really leverages. It only works on the Yamaha. Is that correct?
That is correct. And the reason there's many reasons for that, but one of the biggest ones is that I've just got a long history with Yamaha of knowing how their stuff works. Some other consoles don't have the capability of doing what this can do. And Yamaha has been super supportive of me. They sent me a CL1 so I could, continue to test with it. I don't have any incentive at this point to add other mixing boards. It may be able to be done on other mixers, but got my hands full already with just Yamaha. And it's a popular board.
Yeah. No. Absolutely. Let's jump into the questions, Guy. What do we have?
All right. First one's coming in from Matt Cole, and he's saying, can you control a CL or QL series mixers remotely over the web using only software like Yamaha Stage Mix or other software?
Sort of. You can control it using the editor, certainly. Not Stage Mix or Monitor Mix. Monitor Mix and Stage Mix use a different protocol altogether, and that's not really something that can be transmitted over the internet very easily.
Now, Andy, I will point out, when we did this, when we did a demo of this on AV Tech Talks, one of the things I did do was connect my stage mix to my console that was remotely controlling another console. So that is possible at the same time, but not directly from the iPad of stage mix to the far console. There has to be the console and the software in between.
You need a mixer to connect the iPad or the iPhone to locally. And that's the only way you can do that at the moment.
Next question.
Now, people have asked
go ahead, Andrew.
People have asked about having perhaps a fader controller, a MIDI controller, something like that with the editor. Totally doable. Something that I'm certainly going to be looking into as we move forward.
That's great. Next question.
Next one's coming in from A. Mitchells in Washington, and he says, what are the differences between the Yamaha CL/QL and the TF series that makes matching the control mapping currently impossible? Will the next step be working on TF to TF remote console mapping, or is the Studio Manager profile for the TF just incompatible with this kind of remote control?
Well, the answer to this is more of a general answer. I can only do what Yamaha has put into their mixers. Yamaha changed their entire technology when they went from CLQL to the TF and then to the Ravage. They use a whole different system, a whole different protocol, and it's really not compatible with doing this with the TF. I don't know that it'll ever be possible. If it were, Yamaha would have to do some significant amount of work internally to make it possible. Same goes for the Ravage. The Ravage at this point does not have this capability that I have with the CL and QL, just because of the way it internally works. But they are certainly interested in making it work.
So instead of remotely possible, it's not likely possible. That's that line of solutions.
And it's all up to Yamaha. I would do it if I could, but it's really up to them to decide whether it's going to be possible or not.
That's great. Go ahead, Guy. Next question.
Next one's coming in from Jeff Francis in Columbia, South Carolina, and he says, discuss the audio monitor path for the remote mix engineer. If a hybrid event, how do they hear what the audience hears? Hear the room, note, typo. How do they hear?
How do they hear what the audience hears? Well, I don't know if you'd want to do this for a live show, but I guess you could. I just take the monitor outputs from the console through Dante Virtual Sound Card into Loopback, send Loopback through into Zoom, and away you go. I don't know if that answers the question. Is it?
Yeah, and I think that you might put mics in the back of the room. It probably would be an imperfect situation, like as far as mixing it. And a lot of us have figured out ways that sometimes having an imperfect situation is better than having the local solution. so I think that's where you have to kind of decide which poison is worse there. Look at this. I'm in a bunch of screens. Next question.
Next one's coming in from Tommy Tachance in St. Paul, Minnesota. And he says, how many VPNs were deployed in Mad in the Kitchen?
I believe we only had one as we did that. I mean, it's just the VPN that we have within our office. It was just a matter of giving people. I don't know how many people were deployed. A couple people when we did it. We just used this for the. Is it just the last show that we used it for? Or we did the handoff.
It's been three shows now.
Oh, 3 shows. There we go. See, that's how well it works.
Keep up.
Yeah, exactly.
It's so seamless that nobody even knew.
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
Brian had done 2 of them, and then I just did the last one. And yeah, it was just getting into the. We did it by VPN and just getting the access in, and then I was all set up to control the mixer, just like Andy's doing right now.
And that's the thing, again, just to keep on underlining, just being able to have different people available for this, different people able to run it, be able to hand it off. If you think about a 24/7 broadcast, being able to take we're running this show and we can keep on moving. If we wanted to do something, I've worked on a lot of events that are 48 hours long, 72 hours long. And one of the big issues that we get into is how are we going to staff it locally? And so as we move that to a remote, it just means that you can seamlessly just move from one mixing console to another and keep the show going, and no one's pulling an all-nighter. It's because that's where you make a lot of mistakes. So you have people in their native time zone doing what they need to do and just making the handoffs. It's pretty powerful. Next question.
Scott Mueller in Clinton Corners, New York. Can you control mixed manufacturer consoles, say a Yamaha console from an X32 producer? And he has a note here, perhaps using Streamweaver allows you to map one brand to another.
Never tried it. I doubt it, but if somebody wants to look into that, they could. As I said, I'm only supporting Yamaha stuff right at the moment. I'm not excluding anything else, but I wouldn't know how to make that work.
Yeah, I think that we're doing a lot of R&D in that area. One of the things that we're looking at is for a complex show, a show that we have to really produce remotely possible is what we're planning to use for that. And so that's one of the things we were excited about having Andrew in here, and we've been kind of building our system around it. One of the things we're looking at for a day-to-day show like office hours is basically abstracting control of the mixer to an iPad or to another mixer or something else where I don't need to control the whole thing. I just need to be able to move the sliders up and down. And so we might use remotely possible to get it set up, and then have something where we only expose the things like someone else might have. What we found is, for instance, delays change for everybody. Might have, we're still working on that for this show, and being able to have a person with an iPad that only has the delays. We just kind of that person might be not the audio person. Go ahead, Andrew.
That's completely possible, and that's actually not too hard. Yamaha already has a piece of software called Provisionaire, which allows you to create a custom set of controls that are just certain buttons, anything you want, faders or a button or anything, and any person, you can give a person that thing, and that's all they can control is that one thing. So that's already built into Yamaha. So adapting remotely possible to work with that sort of system shouldn't be hard at all.
That's great. Next question.
Next one's coming in from Scott Mueller in Clinton Corners, New York, and he says, what are the qualities that make an A1 get put on your go-to list?
It's not a question for me. It's a question for you, Alex.
I guess so. Deep knowledge of there's a bunch of things. Deep knowledge of the board and understanding, how to set the board up in a efficient manner. I think that one of the things you run into is A1s that have interesting ideas about how to set it up, and then it gets into a position where they're the only ones that know how that works, and it becomes difficult to work out, or they get themselves into a convoluted kernel that I often call, there's convolution kernels and there's convoluted kernels, which is they'll build something that they can't get from A to B very easily. So when you see a great A1, and my, the person that I worked with for the last decade is Brian, is that Brian, when you're talking to him, it seems like he can do anything really quickly. He's like, oh yeah, and then and either he's moving his hands like at light speed, or he just designed the board in a way that he can tweak the things that he needs to as he needs to, and he knows where those things are, and that comes from experience. It doesn't come from you can't go to a class for that. It's just hundreds or thousands of events that you had to do something. You just know, oh, we want to make sure that we have that access, and we want to make sure we have this dial in. So I think those are the things from our perspective that are important. Being able to be calm and create confidence that's a really hard one to find. So there's a lot of audio A1s that we have that don't instill confidence in our clients when they talk to them, and so that becomes that as you go into the kind of the corporate level of stuff, in rock and roll, and you can be a certain way, and corporate you have to be, if you're actually interacting with a corporate client, there is a demeanor that is required of the A1s as well. And that's a hard thing to find. There's just not. You have to always feel like they're in control, or the client gets upset, or just stops having confidence. So and that's usually stopping having confidence is the beginning of the show unraveling. So anyway, those are some of the stuff for us. I don't know if anyone else has other opinions about that, but deep knowledge, good organization.
A ponytail, right? Like the Brian Maddox ponytail.
I will admit that if we don't see a ponytail, we were like, well, we'll see how they do. I would say that a solid 2/3 of our A1s have either have or have had a ponytail in the not too distant past. And so it's a very interesting cross section of A1s of having long hair. But so we go, they might be able to overcome the fact that they don't have a ponytail. We don't want to be discriminatory about the lack of a ponytail until we actually see their skills. So we try to keep an open mind. Next question.
I would show up with a clip-on ponytail.
Yeah, exactly.
Ball cap with a ponytail.
Next one's coming in from A. Mitchells in Washington, D.C., and he says, can we get a close-up of the remote faders moving or settings changing from the operator console to the hands-off console at the other end? Are there any settings you can't see being adjusted yet?
Is there any setting that doesn't adjust?
There's a handful of things that you can't change from one to the other. They are screens, for example. If he changes from his view of a channel view to another view, like the EQ view, it doesn't change on the other console. I'm sorry, I don't have any way to do any sort of zoom in on that. But he just changed. Ed just changed to his EQ look, and it doesn't change on my end. So that's one thing that's not sent across, and that's just Yamaha's. Okay, good. Another thing that doesn't get sent across is meters. So when you have audio coming into the faraway console, you'll see the meters on that console, but you won't see those meters on your local console. And that's one of the reasons we want to use the editor. So you bring the editor up, and then the meters are showing on the editor in front of you. And that's a little bit better than even showing it on your console, because if there's channels that don't show up on your local console, you can still see the metering on the editor to show you the far console. So you can open up a bigger view.
Andrew, what I'll do is I'll bring the music down. If you just want to hit play on my computer screen next to my console, they should see the meters bounce on the editor.
Okay.
So I turn the music down, and you should be able to see very subtly. I'll see if I can bring my mouse over there. The meters here are moving. I know it's a little hard to see on that view, but that's how I'm able to see and know on the far end that I've got tracks coming to me. So I just brought the DCA down just so we don't hear it. You can still, if I bring it back up, the music should come back in. But that's, of course, I did it at the end of the song. But that's how we would see what's going on from one console to the other.
That's great.
That's one thing. What is the other thing? I think there might be one more thing, but essentially, almost everything is controllable and viewable from the other side.
Yeah, this is Andy. I just wanted to make a comment. I'm using Unity Connect, which is connected to the 090 room. So I'm actually getting all the meters because I'm pulling in those channels individually through Unity Connect. I got 30 channels, I think, coming back to me.
Yeah, you have a copy of the audio. It's not the actual audio. It's a copy of the audio coming to you, which gives you the meters. Right.
That's great. Next question.
Idris Hagee in Fairfax says, hi, can you give a short network connection summary of how the sync and what Yamaha mixers are you using? Many thanks.
And this was done pretty early on in our thing, so I think we can.
Yeah, TCP, yeah, absolutely. Next question.
Eric Nathan in Bellingham, Washington. What networking gear are you using to build the VPN? Can you monitor the connection? Have you used SD-WAN for failover?
And so what we're using is Meraki for our VPNs. But tell us a little bit more. I think we've already answered this a little bit, but tell us how you have it set up typically for a lot of these ones that you're testing, Andrew. It's just that you have your own program that port forwards. You have for the connection between the mixers. We're using a VPN, but you don't need to. You could do port forwarding, and then you said you have your own application that does that as well.
Yeah, I have a little program called Tunnel, which essentially you put on a computer at the far end, and when you fire up that program, it looks for the console. You hit connect. The console sits there and waits, and my program detects that console is ready and available, and then you hit connect on your end, and the two talk to each other. So it makes it super easy for anybody who doesn't want to get into adjusting their network, opening ports, things like that. It just works.
That's great. Next question.
Next one's coming in from Douglas Carmichael, and he says, if you were using remotely possible to mix one show in multiple venues, wouldn't there be issues with compensating for the acoustic characteristics of each venue?
So yeah, it seems like it would be hard to do for a venue. like you might help out with something, but it's hard to do without being able to hear that venue. But I think that where this really comes into remote production, right, Andrew?
Yeah, absolutely. Certainly, I can see a scenario where you have a person mixing the live show and another person watching over or helping or, training, doing things like this, or being a second set of hands when things are getting complicated. Let's say on a festival or something, you've got a whole bunch of things you got to do. Somebody else could be doing those things at the same time, naming channels while you're mixing or something like this. But to actually mix a live show remotely, I wouldn't do it, but maybe there's a way. I mean, you got latency, you've got so many things to deal with. That would be, and you're just not in the room hearing what the audience is hearing. So that would be very strange.
And again, I think that one of the things is exactly what you're referring to is being able to someone just hold the stick for you for a minute. The
I got to go to the bathroom. Can you just
got to go buy a break? And one of the things that we have seen in other events that we've had is we have someone like Brian in the back end working on being able to kind of see all the different locations and be able to step in where needed. In our case, over software before all of this happened, but being able to put out having one person somewhere who can put out fires or just stand in for 8 or 9 different people, it means that person isn't, that they're you have one extra person. You don't have 2 people at every board, primary and backup. You have one person backing each person up. They can just hold the stick. They're not going to design the show for you, and they're not going to be able to do it, but they can hold the stick and make sure that nothing bad happens while you take a moment, whether it's a bio or whether it's to fix something or fix another connection. And that person just isn't tethered to the board, which is, it's really interesting. Next question.
Another one in from A. Mitchells in Washington. He says, what's next on the roadmap? Given the successful projects you've been running so far, more features, more consoles, Allen Heath, Behringer, Avid, Digico?
Certainly more features. I have a lot of ideas of things. As I mentioned something earlier, the idea that you could maybe just run an editor and a fader box instead of having an entire console. If you just needed a few controls, that's something that some people have suggested would be good. I would like to get the networking information a little more robust. So if there's any kind of glitch in the network, I would like the program to monitor that and kind of give you an indication, oh, you were disconnected for a second there. Maybe, double check that your settings are still okay, because you can disconnect and reconnect many times. The issue would be, are you out of sync now with the far console? So if somebody's touching something on the far console and you happen to have just disconnected for a second and then you reconnect, you might be out of sync. So I would like to have a little bit more monitoring of the network within my software to give you to say, hey, you might need to check something, because this is occasionally when you're working with internet connections, as you know, you can get disconnections all the time. So it's something that I would like to make. I can't fix the internet, but I can at least let you know that something went wrong. Right now, you have to be kind of on top of that. So there's a few things like that. Other things are a bit more remote controlling ability. I would like the ability for the far console, for example, to disconnect from from controlling the local console via the far console instead of using the software to connect and disconnect. Maybe you could do that from the far console, press a user-defined key or something like that to do a disconnection if you needed to make a local change. I would like to be able to work with Companion at the same time across the internet. So if you had a Companion button box doing some presets or doing some changes on the console, it would work across the internet as well. So lots and lots of ideas.
And by the way, for our panelists, this is unlike yesterday or Monday night. We can actually see you, so you can go ahead and raise your hand if you have other questions. So I don't think I was clear about that before. So it's possible. It's absolutely possible as opposed to remotely possible. So just go ahead and raise your hand. I'll keep my eye on you if something comes up for you. All right, next question.
Next one's coming in from Douglas Carmichael, and he asks, the German pro audio company Direct Out Technologies demonstrated multi-channel audio transport over the internet using their Prodigy.mp conversion box and VPN concentrator. Could you combine remotely possible and said audio transport to mix a show fully remotely? Yeah, the link to the article.
We already have that with things like Unity Connect, right? Is that pretty much the same thing?
Yeah. I'd also like to see what NDI is doing. So, multi-track NDI with control. I've downloaded the NDI developer package. So I'd like to see what we can do with that. Certainly, lots of people are looking to do audio over the internet and what's the best way. Right now, Unity's a fantastic way. It's a little pricey, so maybe there's another way that people can do. If they can't afford Unity, they can do something like I'm just using Zoom. Zoom works great, but if you need 4 channels and you not just 2 channels, that would be the thing where perhaps NDI or something
I need 12.
else would come in handy. Okay, 12.
12
there you go. But you probably have Unity, so you're covered. But NDI, I don't know. Maybe that's another way to go. So what this person used, the audio transfer. I don't deal with how the audio is transported. There's lots and lots of software out there that's doing that. I would just like to look at maybe a simplified controls system where the control and audio is coming down one path. Maybe.
And you could theoretically have these mixers. You could have it where you had a local audio engineer and a remote audio engineer, so that they're linked together. They're bidirectionally linked, so that they could, so you could give part of that board to the local engineer and have the other part of the board run by the remote engineer. And the reason that I'm interested in that is because one of the things that we're looking at is being able to say, okay, send me some raw audio feeds and I'm going to do some other work with it. But I need to have some control over your board so that I'm getting what I need, out of it. But you still have to mix the local sound and so on and so forth for a back end mix. So anyway, but that does work, right? It's all bidirectional. So you have 2 boards that are basically
you can decide. You can decide I want to control the far console and it doesn't control me, or reversed, or both can control either other. So it depends on your use case. If you don't have somebody sitting at the far console, you want to control it, but you don't want if somebody comes by and bumps a fader, you don't want that to affect you. So you decide for yourself. Connected, disconnected, one direction, either direction, bidirectional. Editor connected to the far console, editor connected to the local console. That's all done within the software. And the nice thing about it is you can change that in an instant. You don't have to reconnect to do any of these things.
Right. Next question.
Next one's coming in from A. Mitchells, and he says, we've seen you turn down a mic that is connected directly to your mixer from another, but can we see and hear you turn down a mic that is completely remote from you, say Alex or guys, as they are speaking while we can see the faders move? Thanks.
So I'll start talking. Andy can pot me down, and so you will eventually not hear me talk. And then I'm just going to keep talking until Andy pots me back up again.
So just FYI, there's a little delay because my camera is very slow. So just FYI, but I'll do that with Alex right now.
Yeah, so I'm going to start talking, and I'm going to keep talking, and basically during this time, Andy is going to pot me down because I deserve it. I deserve to be potted down, but I'm going to keep talking, and then he's going to bring it back up again. So you can hopefully everyone on the other end. I didn't hear the difference because I'm on a mix minus, but yeah. So there you go. That's a live remote mix. Next question.
Next one's coming in from Douglas Carmichael. He says, how are you feeding the Zoom feeds to Andrew? Is he getting in left or right feed, or is he getting one feed per panelist?
I think you're talking about Andy Lipnick, not me. I'm not getting a Zoom feed from anybody.
Right. Yeah. So Andy, we're going Unity Connect for you. Is that correct, Andy?
Yeah, but that audio is not being passed onto the show. So the audio that everybody is hearing is coming from the console at 090. And we are getting individual audio from each of these Zoom rooms.
Right, but you're hearing it from each of ours, but you're able to hear every one of those because we're sending all those channels via Unity Connect down to you. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Yeah. So ours is a little heavier handed. Stereo mix probably works for most things, but ours has a couple more channels. Next question.
Next one's coming in from Jesse in Los Angeles, and he says, can you explain the typical use of the room Ed is in? It looks cool. And I think Ed's in his kitchen, so I think it's mostly made for cooking, right?
Yeah.
Well, the half that I haven't taken over is, yes, very much used for cooking. That's why this past week when I was mixing Mad in the kitchen, I was literally doing it from my kitchen, which was the comical part of it. But yeah, so I do a lot of virtual production. I do a lot of Zoom production. What you don't see in frame is the multitude of laptops and the giant LG quad split monitor that I'm looking at with all my devices. But I do just a lot of virtual production. I was a general live events AV tech, A1 V1 prior to the pandemic, and made the pivot. And I just have a lot of fun toys. So I was able to get involved in this project when Andy B and Brian were talking about it, and I happened to say, hey, I have a QL. I'd love to play with this, and that's kind of how it happened. But yeah, it is a fun little room. There's lots of little toys.
Next question.
Courtney Gooden in Hollywood. He says, does the remote mixer in control have audio monitoring of the monitor bus so he/she can solo channels to find a noise or isolate something that won't affect the line out mix?
Yeah, we did that during the demo there when we had the multi-track playing. Ed was queuing up individual instruments and so you could hear it.
Through the Q bus.
Yeah. Yeah. And also, when I did Mad in the Kitchen this past week, because I'm not set up with Unity Connect on my Mac, that's what I was actually getting. So where Andy Lipnick right now is getting everything back to him because he has Unity Connect, I didn't have that here. So I was taking the monitor out of the 090 console, and that's what I was listening to when I was mixing. So if I queued something, it wasn't going to affect the on-air. I would just be able to hear that on my side, and we sent that to a separate Zoom that was independent of everything else that the show was in. So.
Next question.
Next one's coming in from our friend Sky Gleason in Seattle, and he says, Andy, Brian, Ed, Tucker, and the other audio magic makers, thank you for letting Mad in the Kitchen be your guinea pig. I'm so glad you are showing us how you created the magic. This is amazing work you're doing, Sky.
Thanks, Sky. Next question.
I'm blushing. It's awesome.
Next one's coming in from John Merrill, and he says, all this can work with the TF series?
And we covered that a little earlier, but no, it's not just the QL. It's the QL magic or the QLCL.
CL.
Next.
CL.
Yep. Next question.
Next one's coming in from Jim Wilkins in Marblehead, Mass. And he says, how would the A1 handle other audio tasks remotely, such as audio playback, audio record, and PFL?
Well, PFL we've already covered that. Audio playback, using QLab or something like this. Again, this is something I'm looking into, is figuring out how to get companion, not figuring out, but adding the ability for companion, for example, to control something at the far end. So if you had QLab sitting at the far end on a computer and had a companion StreamDeck on your end, you could run it that way. What was the other part of the question? TFLs, control,
audio record, audio playback, audio record. Those are the pieces. Yeah. Let's go to the
next. I can add to that just a little bit.
Yep. Go ahead.
The way we're playing back QLab is I'm remoted into the 090 computer, and I'm literally just firing that QLab, which has got its audio plugged into that console.
Through the computer, not through companion, right?
That's correct.
Right. Yeah, as long as you can connect to a far computer, you can control anything on that far computer. Just like TeamViewer, AnyDesk, whatever you want to use for that. I'm going to make it so that you probably don't need that at the other end, but we'll see.
Nice. Next question.
Next one's coming in from Stuart Fairweather in Melbourne, Australia. Oh yeah, it's Melbourne. There's pronunciation there. What is the video equivalent of this connection, or is there a video equivalent?
So the reality is Blackmagic already does all of this, and it's completely. We don't have to have motorized faders, which is part of the fun of the Yamaha. But Blackmagic, the switcher just is hearing IP. You can have up to 8 tenants on that connection. So you could have 8 boards all running one switcher if you wanted to. You could put a board and have each person just know only stay in this ME. Remapping it is a little complicated as far as saying I want to have my 1 ME go to the 4 ME or whatever. But the last 4 Mad in the Kitchens were all done by Nate either on his own at home on a 1 ME or a 4 ME in LA on the last episode, running the constellation remotely. So, and we've been doing that a lot. So that's been something that we've been able to do with the ATEMs for a long time. Yeah. So there's video equivalent. Maybe the last 5 years.
I was just going to say, shout out to friends in Australia. If you watch the show called The Block, that was all done using Remotely Possible. It's a reality TV show that airs in Australia.
That's great.
Alex, with the ATEMs, can you do you have to just use the remote software, or can you use a physical ATEM to control another physical?
No, Nate's been using a physical controller, a panel to control it. What you have to do is you have to be able to share share your VPN. And so the way Nate's doing, the way I do it, I can do it with a panel here in my house. In fact, when tomorrow Kevin Maurer will be running it, he's using my panel that I used to have in my house, sitting in his house right now. And what you do is you basically connect your Mac to the VPN. You then share your VPN connection to the Ethernet, another Ethernet connection so think of two USBs to Ethernets going into your Mac. Then you take one in, turn it into VPN, push it out the other one, hook that to a switch, and now anything connected to that switch, whether it's a Yamaha mixer or a ATEM, is inside the network that is part of that VPN. And so that's the easiest way to do it without a Meraki. What I have at my house is a little Meraki Z3 that just everything just plugs into that and then it has it. So, but you don't need to do that. You can do it through your Mac. And so then once a panel or multiple panels or anything else, or if we had a mixer, all those things are inside the VPN network and essentially part of the local network at that point. So that part is easy. What remotely possible is doing is hard. What we do for maybe 5 years ago, we did all the graphics for Dreamforce one year. All the lower thirds and all the other graphics were all done in our office in San Rafael, and they were pushed into switchers, 8 switchers in Moscone. In case you're wondering, saved us a lot of money. So having a central remote location managing all of that, we just didn't have as many people on location that had to do that. That remote part is pretty useful. Next question.
Next one's coming in from our friend Tim McCullough in Wichita, Kansas, and he says, Andrew, can we put your website URL in Mukana for the attendees?
Sure. It's remotely-possible.ca. It's you won't be anybody that's a web designer is not going to be too impressed by what I've come up with. I guess I'm not a web person. I am working on a proper website. Finally found a person that could do this for me. But I'm not working. It's a pandemic. Trying to keep things on a shoestring. So obviously, if you go to remotely-possible.ca, you'll find me there. You can look at my discourse forums. You can contact me there. Anybody who has a CL or a QL wants to have a demo, I'll do a personal demo for anybody who's interested. So you just contact me there.
Next question.
Next one's coming in from James Hutchinson in Dublin, Ireland. And he says, how many audio channels can Zoom provide? Can the translator channels be used as extra sources?
I don't know how the translator channels work. I only heard about that yesterday. I didn't know there was more than 2 channels. Maybe somebody else knows more about Zoom.
I think you can only turn one on at a time, though. So I don't think that would necessarily be that useful. I don't think you can turn on all the translators at a time. So I think that probably wouldn't be. I think it is just two channels. Although it sums them.
Be interesting though, wouldn't it? If you could have just one more channel for intercom.
Yeah, you could do that. Yeah, absolutely. And it is interesting that Zoom sees all the channels. So it is aware of all the channels. It sums them all together. But if you put in 8 channels, it'll see. We've by accident had that happen where all those channels get summed together, which has been more problematic than helpful for us. But it does see them, and so theoretically, at some point, it could do something with that. Next question.
Yeah, if you could figure out how to isolate those channels, that would be the key.
Yeah, absolutely. Next question.
Next question's coming in from Jesse in Los Angeles, and he says, why is it that Yamaha decided to make powered sliders in the first place? Is it to enable, say, presets?
And that's been around. I mean, powered sliders is a... When did they start putting powered sliders in?
You mean motorized faders?
Yeah, motorized faders is what he's talking about.
It's been around for dozens of years. I'm not sure what the question is.
But
yeah,
because if ordinarily, forget about
you're breaking up, Jesse.
Of the switcher, someone's physically moving the sliders up and down, typically who's sitting in front of it. So why would you even need a motor on those sliders or fader controls? That's the right name for them.
when you change scenes, you want the faders to move to the new position.
Right.
When you
Yeah,
change
so I guess that's
layers,
what I meant by
the faders are
presets.
used for multiple reasons. They're used for aux sends. They're used for faders. Channel 1 can be channel 16. They have to be motorized. If you had a digital mixer without motorized faders, it would be almost useless.
Yeah, I mean, it's
Sure.
I didn't understand it either when I got started. When you're a video person, you look at it and you're like, why do I have to have, because a switcher just is the buttons and but it has lights, and those lights are kind of like that fader of telling you where you're at. So the fader is just really telling you this is where this input is at, or this is where this control is at. In the same way on a switcher, we would see lights turned on or off, red or green, that it's in preview or out. It's just that we have in this piece, you have and we've had it, again, we've motorized. I went from not thinking that motorized was very important to being very attached to it. Like when we really moved into motorized phasers maybe 15 or 20 years ago, I was like, I don't know. Same thing with Jesse. I was like, I don't know why we would need this. Like this is it's cute, but yeah, it's
Yeah, in the audio world, it's a must. You can't work with it.
Go ahead, Courtney.
And I actually like it. It's just, for instance, with smart home light switches, you can always tell which ones have the capability to be remotely controlled because they do not have physical adjustments. They're buttons that you tap up or down. I prefer, like with Lutron, you can get nice physical sliders for the light level, but they're not smart. So anyway, it's great that it can be done with audio equipment. It just has not made it to consumer level, at least. Even the professional
expensive.
controls tend to not.
That's expensive.
And it's expensive to do.
It's bulky too, I think, to put in the wall.
Yeah. Go ahead,
and it's
Courtney.
mechanical, so it can break down.
Yeah, flying faders were originally invented for automation, so that you can automate a mix and just concentrate on affecting one channel and then rewind it, and everything's driven off a SMPTE timecode and repeats that mix, and all the faders move that are previously recorded and tied to that SMPTE timecode. So you could automate a mix and then just change one element in that mix without having to remix everything else.
But that was done with analog mixing boards, where the only way to change the level was used to push the fader. So if the physical fader had to move,
but that's where they came from originally.
Yeah, absolutely. Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, I love all the old stories, and I think I've even seen film or video of, you got to get the whole band in the control room. Okay, we're gonna mute everything on this downbeat. Ready? And there's like 16 or 20 fingers going, just because they didn't have automation in the old days.
I have a friend who will bring on sometime soon that does a lot of mixing, and it's amazing to watch. Like, he's got this board that's 30 feet long, and you watch him just kind of work through it, and he just keeps looping the song over and over again, and just kind of moving things around, and and changing the position of the 3D position of the space, but also changing the mix, and just kind of, but that automation, back to Courtney's, that's not possible without motorized faders. Next question. I think the last question we have of the hour.
Next one's coming in from Doug Kaufman, and he says, for those of us using Personas Behringer stuff, the number of mix-minus mixes is limited to the number of separate aux outputs. To go beyond that, do we need to move to Dante and digital routing?
I guess this is a slightly off the Yamaha path.
I don't know Persona stuff.
But yeah, I think that
generally no. You're stuck with the fixed architecture of whatever mixer you have. If it has 16 auxes, it has 16 auxes. You can't
that's a bus.
change that.
Now, it may only have a certain number of auxes output. It may only have a certain number of physical outputs. It's actually one of the reasons that we stuck with the QL5 rather than the CL5, is the CL5 doesn't have much I/O, does it? I mean, without a Rio box, right? I don't think it has any.
Yeah, and the analog connections are less, but the mixes and buses are higher on the CL series.
Right.
There are some consoles that are configurable. Avid, Digico, Allen and Heath, you can configure. Do I want this? How many mixes do I want? How many auxes? How many groups? How many matrices? So that's configurable, but you're still limited to whatever the maximum number is of what that console can do.
Well, thank you very much. That was great.
Thank you.
I'm so excited about this. It's been this pain point for me, especially when when Brian and I weren't, he wasn't working in the same office with me, not having Brian be somewhere else for me. And then we're happy now that we have Andy able to help out, and work on some of our shows as well, because he's local. But being able to build a larger infrastructure of lots of audio engineers that, now we can pick the audio engineers that make the most sense for every show, as opposed to which ones we can find in any given location. Because, I've just worked all over the world, and it can be hard. And so I think that this is revolutionary, not only for production, but for that kind of top end audio engineer who doesn't want to travel or is too expensive to travel to everything. I think it's going to be a really good thing. And then to your point, to new audio engineers that are learning, it's hard to get a hold of those people to show you how to do that kind of thing. So I think that there's a lot of opportunity there. So Andrew, thank you so much for sharing an hour with us and showing us how this works.
And thank you. And thank you for the opportunity to do some testing like with Matt in the kitchen. This is really what I need right now, is I need more real life tests. It's all fun to just show somebody a fader, but when you do it and actually do it in events, I learn so much more, because people go, oh, I got caught because of this or this. So if I can get more people that are going, yeah, I have this, I'd like to try this for an event, I want to hear from you. So I can help you with that.
As is obvious here, we used this morning as a lab. We try to keep it within the range of some level of success, but we plan to use your software almost every week, and possibly get to a point where we use it almost every day, so that we can and we're known for feedback too. so we'll
exactly what I need.
That's perfect. So we'll keep on working on that. Ed, thanks so much for taking the time to hang out with us and set. I know that it's never something like, oh yeah, I'm just going to set up this demo. I know that there was a lot of work in the back end to make all that work. So I really appreciate you stopping in. So thanks so much.
Oh yeah, happy to be here. As often as I can, I show up. It's just, with things opening up, it's been getting busy. So I was glad that this coincided with a time I had some free time and was able to come in and step in with Andy. It's been great being part of the beta team on this, and great working on Mad in the Kitchen last week. So I look forward to doing a lot more of this remote mixing, because I've gotten really accustomed to not leaving my house much. So
it gets addictive.
Just saying. It does. The walk from my bedroom to my office. Yeah, absolutely. Love it.
Yeah, I've definitely gotten to
I want to say thank you to Brian and Ed and Andy, of course, for helping me test this as much as they do. Yeah. It's been great.
Yeah. And Andy, thanks so much working at your house, pushing it through. It's great. It's great to have you as part of the team again. So thanks so much. And of course, Kai, thanks for answering the questions and managing that, or bringing the questions to us. And thanks to our panel for a great set of answers in the first hour, and being part of the second hour. And we're kind of figuring this out and being patient with us as we figure out how to make all of these pieces work as we move forward with this process. And thank you, of course, to our producers who are asking the questions and driving this conversation forward. So we will be back tomorrow. We're going to be doing a little more lab work. What we want to do is we've now kind of gotten this thing starting to work, and so we're going to play a little bit, because what we want to do is now that the panel is now reconnected to this, we'll keep on going back and forth in that process, and then ironing out some of these little glitches at the beginning of the hour, middle of the hour. Those are the things we're going to play with a little bit tomorrow. So tomorrow will be another lab day. So thanks everybody, and we will see you all tomorrow. Bye-bye.
Now what? Did they forget about us?